Hello and welcome to our series, A Question of Faith. If you have watched any of our core messages before, this might look familiar but a little bit different. That's because I'm on Zoom and you are going to find out why very, very soon. So the idea of this series is that we have taken some of the answers and responses that we had from the evangelism survey that we did through the summer, and we want to do something with that. We want to fold that into the conversations that we are having. So from some of your responses, some of the things that you have shared and kind of got into, we have worked out 8 questions that we are going to look at over this series, A Question of Faith. And the way that we thought would be a fun, interesting, engaging, hopefully helpful way to do that would be to have some conversations within our community and share them as a community. So that's why I'm on Zoom. We're going to call some people together and we're going to share some of those conversations. This is week 1 and I am joined by Helly and Sarah. You will see them in a little minute, and they're going to go through and have a conversation. The three of us are going to talk about some things together. So I'd ask that you kind of listen in to that and give that your attention, and then I will pop back up again afterwards, because as ever and always, we are consumed with the practical application of our faith. What do we do with the things that we have heard? So listening to this conversation, if you are a note taker, take some notes, have your Bible with you. There's some references that you're going to want to catch, write down your own thoughts and ideas, connect with that. But this series, the way that this idea is going to work, it's going to be these 8 questions that are born from your responses from the summer survey that we sent. So thank you for that. Enjoy this conversation, and then I will pop back up with what I would like us to engage with this week in response to this conversation. Let's, for me, travel back in time. For you, let's get into this conversation now. Thank you for joining us. This is week 1 in our series of Question of Faith, and we are looking at our first question, obviously, how do I make disciples? And you will see that I am joined by Helly from Ramsey Elim Community Church and Sarah from Peel Elim Community Church. And we're going to spend just the next couple of minutes sharing some thoughts and some ideas about what we think we make disciples, what that involves, how we do that, when we do that, some of the practicals of that. Bear with us and the technology. We are obviously in 3 different places. And so if there's any Zoom lag, then I will do my best to compensate for that. But we are going to have a conversation. How do I make disciples? So where do you want to start? How do we make disciples?
Yeah, I think that's one of those questions, isn't it, that, comes up not just in our community, but hopefully in our own sort of walk with Jesus anyway. I think for me, whenever I start unpacking that, I first kind of think about what I see Jesus doing in the Gospels,
right?
And how he made disciples, and it just all seems so natural somehow, what we read. But then I'm aware as well that when we read it, we only read like the bits that were recorded. And there's probably like tons and tons that happens in between of just like Jesus hanging out with them or walking with them or chatting with them. Like they obviously couldn't record like every single minute of the 3 years or whatever. So yeah, I think that's probably the best place to go to for having to think about how do we make disciples and trying to follow his example, I suppose.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Sarah?
I think as well, it depends maybe on what each person disciple, I feel like is a bit of a Christian word, isn't it? So I suppose it depends how people maybe see that word itself, what it means for them. Like I think for me, or hopefully I'm right. Oh, this is awkward conversation, isn't it? But it's someone who wants to follow Jesus and live by his ways and know more about him. And I think you do that, like Helly, you've just kind of said, I guess, like naturally through spending time with people. I think you can't like force, it's not like you can go out with the intention to be like, right, I've met this person, so you are my disciple now. Sometimes when you read it in the Bible, it's like, and then he made them his disciples, and the way it's written sometimes now to how my head works, But it is like through friendship and talking to people who you know about him, and I guess that they want to know about Jesus as well. So again, the Bible's examples aren't always that the people knew maybe that they were looking for Jesus, but his way and his nature and how he explained things, and through his parables, he showed them about him. So I guess it's a similar sort of process, but for us and the people that we're connected with through, you know, work, friends, family, etc.
Yeah.
I guess something along those lines.
Okay,
I like what you said.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead. Go.
No, I said I like what you said there about like that we need to make sure that the people that we're discipling like want to be discipled, because I think that's one of those things, isn't it, where it kind of depends on where that person is in their process towards Jesus. And I think I personally like fully agree with you that we can't go like, you know, full all guns blazing and bashing people with the Bible when they're just not interested. But equally, I guess maybe discipleship's kind of like you tailor it to where they're at. So
yeah,
even if they're not interested in Jesus right now, then maybe discipling them might look more like making them feel accepted and like they're not being judged, and like it's okay to disagree and it's okay to have questions.
yeah.
And do you know what I mean? I always try to think like, how could I help this person move forward in their relationship with God, even if it is from like a place of hate it, can't deal with it, all Christians are awful, to like a place of, well, you know, some of them are all right, and actually there might be some things worth considering in it, that it might not always be a process from like, you know, from atheism or another world religion to like born again believer declaring Jesus is my Lord type process. Like sometimes we might only see a tiny portion of it, I guess.
Okay,
but
so
then like you
speak
said,
to
sorry.
Yeah, speak to that idea, because that to me is important, and that's an important distinction for us. I think there's a few things that would be helpful for us to maybe share some opinions or introduce some ideas about. So I'm interested in, where do you feel for both of you we get within our community our obsession with disciples? We say it often, make disciples. Where does that come from? So where does this idea of disciple making come from? And then what do you believe that actually the mechanics of that, how does that actually work? You've kind of touched on it, and I don't want to kind of give the game away, but that idea of, is it an event? Is it a decision? Is it a one-time deal? Is it a process? Is it something that happens on a Sunday? Is it something that happens only when I'm with a certain type of people? Is it something that is engaged only through certain types of behaviors? So those two things, where do we get our obsession and fascination with discipleship from? And is that a healthy thing? Is that a good thing? Is that a distraction? Is it just language for church attendance? Is it just language to manipulate behaviors? Is it just, where does that come from? And then secondly, what do you think discipleship is? What does it actually look like?
So I guess from the Great Commission is the, you know, where go and make disciples. I guess that's the maybe what I think maybe where it comes from. And for me, I think maybe it's sort of what we've already touched on. Like it is just, as people who say we follow Jesus, it's that constant awareness all the time in how we live, how we treat people. I don't think you can. I think that is one part of it where your people can see that you're different. It's consistent. It's not just like because you've been on a Sunday morning and you feel good, you're then nice to people on Sunday afternoon, then you're horrible at work. Like consistently you are that way. But also I think discipling people can also look more like a specific process with a certain group of people as well. Maybe there's different layers to it. Maybe it can look slightly different during the purpose of it, or how much someone wants out of it. I don't think it's limited to certain days or times. I think it's all the time. But then maybe with certain people, it's a deeper version of of it, but we've always got that awareness, if that makes sense, maybe.
Okay. Helly?
Yeah, I think I guess the language has probably over the years changed, and we've used different terms for different things, and we borrow things and we put them down and we pick them up again. And I think the word disciple is kind of one of those words. But I guess what I would guess we mean collectively by the word disciple is anyone that is following Jesus. So we would maybe call ourselves disciples. We wouldn't just think it's just the 12 people in, that Jesus had, or the 70, or whatever else we want to, whatever else numbers we want to put it in the Gospels. I think we would see that anyone at any time that's following Jesus is a disciple. So therefore we are now being discipled, within our community. I guess is that ongoing process of becoming more like Jesus and following him better in the everyday things. But then when we talk about making disciples, I think it extends to, in some ways, everyone. That it is the people that we hang out with that already do know Jesus, and we can point them to Jesus in, our conversations with them, whether it's through like encouragement or like just maybe pointing them to scripture or praying together, or always kind of bringing them back to Jesus. Right. But equally, I guess with people who don't yet know Jesus, discipling them might look like pointing them to Jesus, but in a less obvious way at times. Sometimes it can be obvious, but I think, especially in our culture today, it can be counterproductive, can't it, if we go in, really aggressive. But the idea of it is that when people meet with us, we would point them to Jesus in some way, whether it is through like our character or what we share with them about what Jesus done with us, or whether it is through prayer or whatever. Okay. I don't know if that answers the question.
It's your, for you both, your take on it that is what is important and interesting in this conversation. That's the point of it. And where does that understanding meet kind of people who are going to watch this communication and the influence that does or doesn't have on what people think about it? What do you believe, both of you, is our role in discipleship? What's our role? What's God's role? What's the division of labor in that space? I think it's been interesting that you've both spoken about it being an always on thing. So the suggestion that who you are as a person is a really significant piece of that conversation. But what in your mind is the roles that God is performing in those relationships, and what are the roles that you are performing in those relationships, and how does that break down, and what do you feel about who's responsible for what and why?
I don't think we're responsible for what other people pick up from it, if that makes sense. We can, I think God, obviously we can't make ourselves God. We can't like make people follow Jesus. We can tell them about him and then leave it to God to, I think only he can then intervene sometimes in changing like their heart and their way they think. I think because otherwise it becomes pressure and maybe manipulating people and forcing people, and I think there's a fine line. If we think, we just keep telling them, then they will believe it. It's quite forceful, isn't it? So I don't think we're responsible for what people take from the conversations. I think we're responsible for how we communicate it, and we have to make sure we do it well and sensitively and appropriately, and not in a horrible way or whatever it looks like. I think that's what we're responsible for, and then what people take from it, or if they choose to follow it further, I think is down to them and down to God, I guess. I guess, I do think that.
Thank you. Helly, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think along similar lines, really. I think, as Pentecostals especially, we believe the Holy Spirit is at work within, his people. So I think a lot of it is down to his work, and that, like Sarah said, we can't force people, we can't guarantee that anyone is gonna move forward or not. But I do think one of the biggest responsibilities for us when we're discipling people is also our own discipleship process, because if we're actually not hanging out with Jesus, and if we're not being kind of transformed into his likeness, and if we're not hearing from him and things, it's quite obvious to others that there's like a duality between what we say and who we are. And I think that's where I find like that's something that I personally take quite seriously, that I can't control what other people believe or what they pick up, but I can control how I respond to Jesus and how that is reflected off of me in the situations that I'm in. And like, I think responsibility, when we think about discipleship, like it is our responsibility in the sense that we can't just sort of sit around and wait for people just to pick it up out of nowhere, like it was in the Gospels. Jesus discipled the disciples, and then they went and made disciples, and we see that follow on in Acts and in the rest of the New Testament. So clearly it is what Jesus has asked us to do, but it is knowing that it's not like, just like Sarah said, it's not down to like how good we are at it as such. I think it's down to the work of the Spirit in us and in the people that we're discipling, and just that obedience to what the Spirit is asking of us, both through the Scripture and in personally through like personal revelation or whatever. That I think it's kind of like like Sarah said, this fine line situation, really.
Cool, thank you. So we've kind of alluded to that we take our cues from Matthew 28, 19 and 20, Jesus' words after his resurrection, his commission to the immediacy of those with him there and then we make it the Great Commission. And we're going to go on and talk about this in another week in this series. So I don't want us to get too, I don't want to give all the answers away in week one, but we take that Great Commission seriously, and we receive some of that instruction, and that there is the idea packed in there, and just the idea in our emulating of Jesus as we point to him. As Sarah has said, we're not God, we're not trying to become God, but as we point people to him, that the thing that's important to me, and I'm interested, and we'll make this our last question, is the practicalities of how we do that, because I think we have a strong idea, but then in its application is forever what I'm obsessed with. I think we can play with the idea all day, and I think there's merit in that and there's value in that. But I think for us kind of in this space, and for people who will connect with this communication, the practical application of how do I make disciples, they're even in the language, they're being discipled, being apprenticed, following, attached to somebody, infers and implies that there is an exchange of practical lived wisdom. So what do you feel would be absolutely top of the list for you both, in terms of so somebody has arrived out of space and they say, how do I make disciples? How do I do that practically? What are you telling them? What are your top, I don't know, pick a number, 3, 5, but a handful of things, a couple of things that you think are absolutely essential practically in how you disciple, how you point somebody else to Jesus, how you walk with somebody else in their experience. If you could speak to that, that'd be great.
I think for me, my top one has to be prayer. Praying for them, like privately, but also offering to pray for them. So, whether they are already a follower of Jesus or someone who's never met Jesus, I find that prayer is, even for those that don't necessarily believe in Jesus, they understand the intention, that it is something positive, and it's rarely rejected, is what I've found. So then when you pray and then God does something, you've got something really like kind of concrete almost to start having a conversation about, and be like, oh well, I prayed for you for that, and how's that going? And so I think that's a good thing. I think secondly, the thing for me is just spending time with people, just hanging out, trying to get to know them, and being open with them about what's going on in my life. And I think whenever you make friends with someone, obviously disciple is different than friend, but when you kind of become connected with somebody, it's kind of normal for you to share what's happening in your life, and it's sort of more natural. Then you're not just shoving all your things on somebody who doesn't even know you. So then you can say like, oh, this thing happened, I was praying and God said this, or I've really been thinking about this, and what do you think about that? I mean, it's that kind of it comes out in the conversation with the people that you've got to know. That those are my top things, I'd say.
Great, thank you. So welcome back, Sarah. We had some technical problems and you were disconnected and kicked out of the chat, but you are back now. So share your thoughts with us now on that, please. Thank you.
So as I was saying, I think Helly's points are really, really important, and just to go and complement those, I think we have to, it sounds obvious, but we have to know Jesus ourselves and know who we're sharing. And I think unless we spend time with him and know him, how can we tell other people about him? And I know that sounds really obvious, but I think it's just important to know kind of really exactly who and what we're communicating and inviting people to follow. I guess that's the thing. If we're actually just telling people about, just for example, a Sunday morning or an event or a Christmas play or whatever it is, isn't nothing against any of those things, but that's not discipling people to Jesus. So I think it's knowing really clearly who we're telling them about, and also I guess clearly communicating what we know about him so that people can understand that and choose to follow the right thing, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think for me it would be that knowing who we're sharing, spending time with people, and I guess like we've already covered, really tuning in and paying attention to where that person is at, and using opportunities that come up. We've spoken about the Holy Spirit and how he intervenes and stuff, and I do think there are moments sometimes that come up that it's then our responsibility to respond to them and share well, and to continue that process, not just drop people like a hot potato if they don't show an interest in having the conversations with us. I think then you haven't got any integrity, or your intentions aren't in the right place, because you either care for people or you don't, even if you don't agree on things. So I think that's kind of key.
So in summary, the practicals, we're saying prayer is massive, your own relationship with Jesus, your own awareness of Jesus, your own consciousness of the teachings of Jesus would be super helpful. To engage in a bespoke process with people, and look to share life with people deliberately, irrespective of attendance to your kind of habit forming behavior. Great. I think I said before the technical interruption that would be our last question. So I just want to give you an opportunity, if there's anything that is absolutely burning within you to talk about discipleship, that we haven't touched on or talked about, that you feel is important and you want to share in this moment. Maybe if you've got something that would be super helpful.
I think just I just want to encourage everyone to start somewhere, just give it a go. It's not, there's no pressure for you to be perfect. It's not really about you. It's not about us. It's about Jesus.
That's great.
So, and he already is pretty good. So if we are pointing people to him, that's fine. You don't have to be a perfect person or know the Bible inside and out or anything to do that. And I think, like, you know, don't be alone with it. Share ideas of what is working and questions that you're coming up against, because we're all trying to figure it out, aren't we? Like, if we look just generally what people are talking about, you know, even globally in terms of kind of Christian media and whatever, discipleship is the thing. We're all trying to figure out, like, how do we get good at it? So, you know, let us know how you get on and how we can help each other, really.
Great. Sarah?
Yeah, I think as well, like, I guess similar, like, just take pressure off yourself, just be normal about it. You know, it should just, Jesus should just be a normal part of our lives, just like other parts of our lives are. He's not normal. He's obviously extraordinary and we communicate that well. But I mean, the way that we share him, it should just be so part of us that it's just, we just talk about it and don't make it weird and don't make it awkward. And I think just encourage each other as well. So when you have had something, because, you know, sometimes you might share something and people just go, oh, cool, nice to know, and you don't think it goes anywhere. So then other times people are like, oh, cool, so what about this? And they might ask stuff. So then when you feel like, oh, good, that's great, I had a really good conversation, then encourage other people within our community by sharing that when you meet them and stuff, so that people can pray for them, like all the things that we've said, support you, support them. It can be part of a bigger thing. We're part of a bigger thing. So encourage each other and share and communicate and just give it a try, I guess.
Nice. Great. Thank you. I just have a couple of things to finish. There's a quote that I like from Alan Hirsch. It says, "We cannot consume our way into discipleship." And that helps me and refreshes me and releases me from looking at packaging things or creating products for people. Or there's another book that I'm reading at the moment, that the gospel shouldn't sound like an advert for soap or a new washing machine or a new car. It shouldn't feel like we're trying to advertise a product that we're trying to flog, but we don't, you know, maybe understand or use or believe in ourselves. So I think to release ourselves from that pressure of Jesus is not a product that we're trying to sell to people. It's, you cannot consume your way into discipleship. I think the relational elements of it are really important. And to kind of double down on that point with Matthew 28:19, Jesus says, "Go and make disciples, baptize them, teach them." And a friend of mine who's considerably more kind of further down this road with Jesus than I am, talks about where the imperative in the language is, and we can get ourselves mixed up about the going, and we can place the imperative on go, and so we can distract ourselves with the going, and we can place the imperative on the teach, and we can get kind of consumed in, unless it's the right version of the Bible and the right person and the right gender from the right person with the right Bible, then I'm not interested, and we can get distracted with that stuff. But actually in the language, the imperative is on make disciples, and this idea of a shared life, and kind of walking that road towards Jesus together, and sharing the best of your brilliant days and the honesty of your hardest days, and finding Jesus with people in that adventure. To echo what you have both said, for people to try that, and there isn't a class that you can graduate from or a moment in time that you are allowed to go and make disciples. Jesus has given you permission and a commission to make disciples. So thank you for your time. We're going to wrap up this conversation for this week here. Sarah and Helly will be back with us next week for a second conversation, thinking about how do I engage with difficult questions. So make sure you are connected with that. Send this to somebody, see what they think, and have a brilliant week, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Hello again. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that conversation and filming that conversation. I think there's some really, really great stuff in there. This obsession that we all have at the moment with discipleship and making disciples, and what does that mean, and how do I make disciples? I think that's really important for us to have some of our own language as communities around that, and to hear some of our own thoughts on that. So I hope that has been helpful for you, but that's not where the conversation ends. This is an ongoing process that we are engaged in. And so the the thing that we want to do with that this week is I want to encourage you to go and have a coffee with somebody. And coffee might not be your thing, so don't get too hung up on the specifics of that. But the point is that we are deliberately making time and space to connect with people, to listen to people, to hear their stories and share some of yours, to put into practice some of the things that hopefully you have been encouraged by from the conversation that you have just watched and listened to. So get it in your diary, make time and space for it, be deliberate about it, connect with somebody this week and ask to connect with them. And it can be via this format. We have the technology and we want to use it to the best of our ability, but we can also connect with people in person. We can go and find places and spaces. Again, you might not be a coffee person, totally fine. Don't disqualify yourself. You are still as equally called to this task for this week as the rest of us. So go for a walk, connect with somebody, take somebody some food, drink decaf tea if that's your preference ahead of coffee, whatever it might be. But the point is that you make the effort and use your energy to connect with somebody this week, to create time and space to hear from them. And we want to follow that up with some things that will be sent out to you on, if you're watching this on Sunday, they'll come out on Friday. So that's the pattern, that's the rhythm. And if you've got no idea what I'm talking about and you don't receive these communications and you would like to receive these communications, get in touch and we'd really like to send those through to you. I hope that's been helpful. Reach out. We want to have the conversation. We want to connect with you around it. Thank you again to Helly and to Sarah for your time and contribution. You will hear from them again next week. And then there'll be some different people throughout the rest of the series that have joined me for conversations around these 8 questions from you. Be brilliant. Go well. Share Jesus with somebody. Get that coffee appointment in. And we'll see you soon. Bye.